went to the first meeting about this event and I realized it was for elementary and high school teachers, I wondered why I, a university professor, had been invited to speak. And I struggled with how I could make my talk relevant and frame it for educating younger students. I was discussing this with a colleague of mine when he asked me this question: what is the difference between a freshman and a high school senior? And with that, I feel like what we are talking about this evening is very relevant for all of us here. As a professor of design at the undergraduate level, I strive to create an environment where students can discover who they are as a designer and to instill a sense of trust with the students around exploration and experimentation in the classroom. Experimentation and exploration requires risk-taking, and with risk comes failure. As we all know, the mantra these days is to embrace failure, to learn through failure, to fail forward. And this is a wonderful, free-spirited mantra, but how is failure being built into our curriculum? And what are the incentives for students to want to engage in activities that could lead to failure? And Sir Ken Robinson reflects on creativity and the shift from our childhood willingness to take risks to our adulthood, where we rely on what has worked in the past. And he states, if you are not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original. And I agree with him. However, I do take issue when he blames teachers for educating students out of their creative capacity. I would argue that this is the cause of a much bigger systemic problem, as well as a neurological one. I disagree with his claim because the brains of human beings experience new things every second. It is programming itself with associations, and we rely on those associations to survive. The problem is that the mind follows the simplest path, the path that has succeeded in the past. Thank goodness. So when I tell students that the classroom is a safe place for failure, at the very mention of the word, their eyes grow large, and I can see the panic rising, and failure equals bad grades. Bad grades are connected to identity, moving forward, as well as financial aid in many cases. Creative classroom curriculum needs to be carefully choreographed to make sure that students are out of their comfort zone and working on projects where no associations can be relied on. I have developed a project that was inspired by Ken Miki, a designer and teacher in Japan who wrote a book called Apple. He uses the apple to teach his students how to research objects empirically through making, and he provides them with a series of exercises that guide them through a process of exploration. I have taken this idea, but I do not guide the students through the process. I allow them to feel the discomfort of the unknown. I've used the apple and the egg for this project. These objects are both natural and rich with metaphoric and symbolic potential. They are both connected to global issues, such as farming, transportation, genetic modification, and so on. What is so lovely about the apple and the egg is that they are everyday global objects. Most people in the world are familiar with apples and eggs, maybe even rely on them, yet most of us take them for granted. Every student is given an egg or an apple at the start of class and are told to explore it, to use it as a muse for creative practice, to use it as both a subject and as a medium. And students look at each other in hopes for some clue as to what they can or should do. And slowly they begin. Some check the internet. But usually they start by sketching the object. They might draw on it with a marker or paint, and slowly they become more and more engaged. And if you are working with the eggs, it really gets going when you hear the first crack. The class becomes alive, and shells are being used as a filter for light, apple slices are being used as stamps, yolk or juice is being used as a drawing medium, ink is added, eggs are dropped onto paper to see what patterns are made by the impact, biting and chewing is being recorded. Students begin to see the excitement and joy of discovery and their need to get up out of their chairs and physically engage with their materials and with their surroundings and with each other, to step away from the computer. The class is a mess and the students are exuberant, and that is how I introduce this project, through kinesthetic learning and embracing the uncertain. Students are then instructed to go home and further explore their object on their own. They are to bring the results of their investigations to the next class for discussion and grading. Panic again, working at home is isolated, and they have nobody to reassure them, to support them, or to measure themselves against. And the questions. How many pages do you want? How many different explorations do I need? What will you be looking for when you mark it? What kind of explorations can I focus on? What they are actually asking is, how do I get a good grade? The first stage of this project, all I mark is quantity. How many different explorations did you try? This gives students permission to make mistakes, to make really ugly things, to really investigate without any fear. To quote Sister Karita Kent, there is no wrong, there is only make. While students are exploring their object empirically, they are also conducting secondary research. They are reading and trying to find connections between their making and their reading. They need to find a way for the materiality of their object to support the message they intend on conveying. The project is open-ended, meaning there is no prescribed outcome, which is another form of uncertainty for the students. They are used to be given an objective. Outcomes can take any range, from posters to videos to advertising campaigns and branding exercises. This project is my favorite one to give. It is the hardest one to give, but it is my favorite. I learned just as much from the students' projects as they do creating them. And students have created anti-bullying campaigns, an infographic on surrogacy, mental health awareness games and campaigns, children's books, online anti-rape information. The increase in student confidence is palpable, and every single time I am awed by the results. Thank you.